The grand hallway of Buckingham Palace was silent except for the echo of footsteps on marble. Guard Sergeant Marcus Reed stood at attention near the East Wing entrance, his eyes scanning the corridor as he had done 1,000 times before. But tonight felt different. Tonight, something was about to happen that would shake the very foundations of royal protocol. It was just past 8 in the evening when Queen Camilla walked toward him, her silk gown rustling softly with each step. Around her neck hung an exquisite sapphire necklace, the stones catching the chandelier light like frozen tears. Marcus had seen it before. Everyone had. It was the famous Windsor sapphire, a piece that had been in the royal family for generations. But Marcus knew something nobody else did. That necklace didn't belong to Camilla. Not tonight. His heart pounded as she approached. He had his orders. Clear, direct orders from someone he couldn't refuse. His hands felt cold inside his white gloves. This was the moment. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, stepping forward. His voice was steady, but his pulse hammered in his ears. Camilla stopped, surprised. Guards didn't usually speak unless spoken to. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Yes, Sergeant?" Marcus swallowed hard. "I need to ask you to remove the necklace, ma'am." The words hung in the air like smoke. Camilla's face went pale. Behind her, 2 ladies-in-waiting gasped. One dropped her clutch bag. The sound of it hitting the floor was like a gunshot in the quiet hall. "Excuse me?" Camilla's voice was barely a whisper. "The necklace, Your Majesty. It's required for Princess Anne, immediately." Camilla's hand moved to her throat, fingers touching the cool stones. Her eyes searched Marcus's face. She looked confused, hurt, and something else. Afraid. "Who gave you this order?" she asked, her voice trembling now. Marcus couldn't answer that. "Not yet. Not here." "Ma'am, I'm following direct protocol. The Princess Royal needs this piece within the hour. It's urgent." The hallway suddenly felt smaller. Camilla glanced at her attendants, then back at Marcus. Her cheeks flushed red. She had been humiliated before, many times in the press, in whispered conversations. But never like this. Never by her own guard. "Never in her own home? Does the king know about this?" she asked quietly. Marcus's silence was answer enough. Camilla's hands shook as she reached behind her neck. The clasp was delicate, and her fingers fumbled with it. One of the ladies-in-waiting stepped forward to help, but Camilla waved her away. She wanted to do this herself. She needed that small dignity. When the necklace finally came free, she held it in her palm for a moment. The sapphires seemed dimmer now, as if they knew they were being taken. Then she placed it carefully in Marcus's outstretched hand. "Tell Anne," Camilla said, her voice breaking slightly, "that I hope it serves her better than it did me." She turned and walked away, her head high, but her shoulders trembling. The ladies-in-waiting followed, whispering urgently to each other. Their voices faded down the corridor. Marcus stood alone, holding the necklace. It was heavier than he expected. Or maybe that was just the weight of what he'd done. He didn't know it yet, but this moment would change everything. Not just for him. Not just for Camilla, but for the entire royal family and Princess Anne. She was waiting in the blue drawing room, completely unaware of the storm that was about to break. If you want to see what happens next, make sure you're subscribed. You won't believe where this story goes. Marcus began walking toward the blue drawing room, the necklace clutched tight in his hand. With each step, he wondered if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life, or if somehow he'd done exactly the right thing. Asterisk, the blue drawing room was exactly as its name suggested. Rich blue wallpaper covered the walls, and gold-framed portraits of long-dead royals stared down with stern expressions. Princess Anne sat in a high-backed chair near the window, her posture perfect, her face unreadable. She wasn't alone. Standing beside her was Sir Edmund Hargrove, the king's private secretary. He was a thin man with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. When Marcus entered and closed the door behind him, Sir Edmund's gaze locked onto the necklace immediately. "You have it?" Anne said. It wasn't a question. Marcus approached and held out the necklace. Anne took it, her fingers steady where Camilla's had shaken. She examined it closely, turning it over in the light. For a long moment, nobody spoke. How did she react? Anne finally asked. Marcus hesitated. He had been trained to follow orders, not to share personal observations about the royal family. But something in Anne's voice told him she genuinely wanted to know. She was surprised, ma'am, and upset. Upset, Anne repeated softly. She set the necklace on the table beside her. I imagine she was. Sir Edmund stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. Sergeant Reed, you performed your duty admirably. However, you must understand the delicacy of this situation. What happened tonight cannot leave this room. I understand, sir. Do you? Sir Edmund's voice was sharp now. Because what you just did will create questions. Questions from staff. Questions from the press if word gets out. Questions from the king himself. Anne raised her hand, and Sir Edmund fell silent immediately. Edmund, please. The sergeant followed orders. My orders. Marcus's eyes widened slightly. So it was Anne. She had commanded this. But why? Anne stood and walked to the window. Outside, the palace gardens were dark, except for scattered lights along the pathways. She stared into that darkness for a long time. This necklace, she said quietly, was given to my mother by my father on their 10th wedding anniversary. The Queen wore it only on special occasions. It meant something to her. It meant family, legacy, continuity. She turned back to face Marcus. Her eyes were hard, but there was pain there too. When my mother died, this necklace was supposed to pass to me. I am her only daughter. But somehow, through some arrangement I was never consulted about, it ended up in Camilla's jewelry collection. I've watched her wear it at state dinners, at galas, at events where my mother should have been remembered, where I should have been honored. Marcus said nothing. This was far above his pay grade. This was royal family business, the kind of thing that ordinary people never saw or understood. Tonight, Anne continued. There is a private memorial service for my mother. Small, intimate, just close family, and a few trusted friends. I wanted to wear this necklace. I needed to wear it. So yes, I sent you to retrieve it. Sir Edmund cleared his throat. Your Royal Highness, perhaps the sergeant can stay? And interrupted. He should hear this. He should know why. She picked up the necklace again, holding it against her chest. My brother is king now. I respect that. I serve the crown faithfully, as I always have. But I will not let my mother's memory be erased. I will not stand by while everything she cherished is given away or forgotten. Marcus felt the tension in the room like a physical weight. This wasn't just about a necklace. This was about family, about loss, about the complicated, painful relationships that existed behind palace walls. What happens now? Marcus asked quietly. Anne smiled, but it was sad. Now, Sergeant, you return to your post. You forget this conversation, and I go to honor my mother the way she deserves. She walked toward the door, then paused. Thank you, she said, without turning around. I know what I asked of you wasn't easy. Then she was gone, leaving Marcus alone with Sir Edmund. The private secretary studied him for a long moment. You're a good soldier, Reed, but you've just stepped into something complicated. Very complicated. I understand that, sir. Do you? Sir Edmund moved closer. By tomorrow morning, Camilla will have told the king. He'll be furious. There will be an investigation. People will want to know who authorized this. And when they find out it was Anne, ... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Marcus felt his stomach drop. He had thought this was simple. Follow orders. Do his duty. But nothing in the palace was ever simple. Will I lose my position? Marcus asked. Sir Edmund sighed. That depends on how this plays out. Stay quiet. Stay loyal. And pray that cooler heads prevail. Marcus nodded and left the room, his mind racing. As he walked back through the palace corridors, he wondered what Camilla was doing right now. Was she angry? Was she crying? Was she planning her revenge? And what would the king do when he found out? Would he side with his wife or his sister? The palace felt different now. The marble halls seemed colder. The portraits on the walls seemed to watch him with accusation. Marcus returned to his post, standing at attention as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. He could feel it in the air, in the silence, in the way other guards glanced at him when they thought he wasn't looking. The storm was coming, and Marcus was standing right in its path. The phone call came at 6 in the morning. Marcus had barely slept, his mind replaying the previous night over and over. When his supervisor appeared at his barracks door, face grim, Marcus knew immediately. The king wants to see you now. 20 minutes later, Marcus stood in the king's private study. The room smelled of leather and old books. King Charles sat behind a massive oak desk, his face drawn and tired. He looked older than Marcus remembered. Beside him stood Camilla, her eyes red from crying. The king didn't invite Marcus to sit. "Explain yourself, Sergeant Reed." The king's voice was cold, each word precise and cutting. Marcus swallowed. "Your Majesty, I was following orders." "Whose orders?" The king slammed his hand on the desk. Papers jumped. Camilla flinched. "Who gave you permission to humiliate the queen in her own home? To strip jewelry from her neck like she's some common criminal?" "Sir, do you have any idea what you've done?" The king stood now, leaning forward on his desk. "My wife came to me last night in tears. Tears, Sergeant. She felt violated, disrespected, and you just followed orders?" Marcus wanted to tell him it was Anne. He wanted to explain that he'd been caught between two royals, that he'd simply done what he was told. But the words stuck in his throat, because telling the king would mean betraying Anne. And something about that felt worse than facing the king's anger. "I apologize, Your Majesty. I made a grave error in judgment." Camilla spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet, fragile. "Why the necklace, Sergeant? Of all the pieces I own, why that one?" Marcus met her eyes. He saw the hurt there, raw and real. And he saw something else. Understanding. As if she already knew the answer. "I can't say, ma'am. Can't or won't." The king demanded, "Can't, Your Majesty." The king's jaw tightened. He glanced at Camilla, then back at Marcus. For a moment, Marcus thought he saw something flicker in the king's eyes. Recognition, realization. But it passed quickly. "You're suspended from duty," the king said flatly. "Effective immediately. There will be a formal inquiry. If I find that you acted alone, your career in the royal guard is over. If I find that someone put you up to this..." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Marcus saluted, turned, and walked out. His legs felt like lead. Everything he'd worked for, gone. Years of service, destroyed in one night. And for what? A necklace. A family dispute that wasn't his to fight. But as he walked through the palace one last time as a guard, it passed the memorial room. The door was slightly open. Inside, he saw Anne standing before a portrait of Queen Elizabeth. The Windsor sapphire rested against her collarbone, gleaming in the soft light. Anne turned and saw him. Their eyes met. She gave him the smallest nod. Not gratitude exactly, but acknowledgement. "You did your duty," Marcus kept walking. Outside, the morning was cold and gray. Other guards at the gate pretended not to see him leave. News traveled fast in the palace. By now, everyone knew. The sergeant who humiliated the queen, the guard who forgot his place. Marcus went to a small cafe near his apartment. He ordered coffee he didn't want and sat by the window, watching London wake up. People rushed past, heading to work, living their normal lives. They had no idea what happened behind palace walls. The secrets, the pain, the impossible choices. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Meet me at St. James's Park. Noon. Come alone. E.H. Edmund Hargrove." The king's private secretary. Marcus's stomach twisted. Was this it? Was he going to be offered a deal? Keep quiet and disappear? Or was this something worse? At noon, Marcus sat on a bench near the lake. Ducks paddled in the water, oblivious to everything. Edmund appeared, dressed in a dark coat, looking like any other businessman. He sat down without greeting. "You didn't name her, no, sir?" "The king knows anyway. He's not stupid. He knows Anne has wanted that necklace back for years. He knows his wife and his sister barely tolerate each other. He put it together." Marcus said nothing. "You're loyal?" Edmund continued. That's rare, especially now. The palace needs loyalty. I'm suspended, sir, for now. Edmund pulled out an envelope. This is a letter of transfer. A position at Windsor Castle. Different unit, different command structure. Better pay, actually. The king doesn't know about it yet, but he will. Marcus stared at the envelope. I don't understand. Anne went to the king this morning, told him everything. Took full responsibility, said you were following her direct orders and couldn't refuse. She offered to resign from all royal duties if you were dismissed. Marcus's breath caught. She what? Princess Anne doesn't make empty gestures, Sergeant. When she commits fully. The king was furious with her. They had a row that could be heard 3 rooms away. But in the end, Edmund paused. In the end, he saw his sister standing up for something she believed in. And he remembered that's who she's always been. Edmund stood. Take the transfer. Disappear from London for a while. Let things cool down. The king will calm down. Camilla will eventually forgive. Or she won't. But you'll still have a career. What about Anne? The Princess Royal, Edmund said with a slight smile, is currently having tea with her brother. They're talking. Really talking. Maybe for the first time since the coronation. He walked away, leaving Marcus with the envelope. Marcus opened it slowly. Inside was the transfer letter, official and signed. But there was something else. A handwritten note on royal stationery. Duty isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. Thank you. And Marcus folded the note carefully and put it in his pocket. Around him, London continued its endless rhythm. But for Marcus, everything had shifted. He'd learned something about the royal family that few ever understood. They were human. Flawed, complicated, capable of both cruelty and kindness. And sometimes, just sometimes, doing the right thing meant standing in the fire. The memorial service for Queen Elizabeth took place in a small chapel within Windsor Castle grounds. Unlike the grand public ceremonies months before, this was intimate. Only 15 people attended. Family, close friends. Those who had truly known her. Anne stood near the front, the Windsor sapphire catching candlelight. She had chosen a simple black dress, no other jewelry. The necklace was enough. It was everything. The king arrived last, Camilla on his arm. The room went quiet. Everyone could feel the tension. Anne turned, meeting her brother's eyes. For a moment, nobody moved. Then something unexpected happened. Camilla walked forward, leaving Charles's side. She moved directly toward Anne. The entire room held its breath. Camilla stopped just in front of Anne. Up close, the necklace seemed to glow. Camilla's eyes lingered on it, then lifted to Anne's face. Looks beautiful on you, Camilla said softly. As it should. Anne's expression shifted. Surprise, confusion, and something that might have been relief. Camilla, I know. Camilla raised her hand gently. Let me say this. I never understood what that necklace meant to you. To your family. I saw it as just another piece. Beautiful, yes. But just jewelry. I was wrong. Her voice trembled slightly. Your mother earned that necklace through decades of service. Through sacrifice. Through love. I've only been queen for 2 years. I haven't earned the right to wear something that precious. Anne's eyes glistened. You didn't have to come here. Yes, I did. Camilla glanced back at Charles, who watched with an expression Marcus would never see but could imagine. We're family now. For better or worse. And family means understanding what matters to each other. She reached out and touched the necklace lightly, her fingers gentle on the sapphires. She would be proud of you, Anne, for fighting for what you believe in. For honoring her memory. Anne's composure cracked. A tear rolled down her cheek. I didn't mean to hurt you. I couldn't let it go. I know. Camilla smiled sadly. And I understand now. I do. The 2 women stood there, generations of royal protocol and modern family dynamics colliding in a single moment. Then slowly, and embraced Camilla. It was brief, awkward even, but it was real. The service began. They sang hymns Elizabeth had loved. They shared memories, some funny, some heartbreaking. Anne spoke about her mother's dedication, her humor, her strength. Charles talked about her wisdom, her guidance, her unwavering sense of duty. When Camilla's turn came, she surprised everyone. "I never had the privilege of being Queen Elizabeth's daughter," she said, her voice steady. "But I had the privilege of watching her daughter carry on her legacy. Princess Anne embodies everything Her late Majesty valued: duty, loyalty, courage, and today. Wearing that necklace, she honors not just her mother's memory, but everything the crown represents." Anne closed her eyes, overwhelmed. Charles reached over and squeezed his sister's hand. After the service, people gathered outside in the soft afternoon light. Charles pulled Anne aside, away from the others. "You put me in an impossible position," he said quietly. "I know." Camilla was devastated. "I was furious. I almost suspended you from royal duties entirely." Anne nodded, accepting this. "Would you like me to step back?" Charles was quiet for a long moment. "No," he finally said. "I need you. The crown needs you. You're the most dedicated member of this family, Anne. You always have been." He looked at the necklace. "Mother would have wanted you to have it. I should have given it to you myself years ago. I was trying to help Camilla feel accepted, to give her pieces of royal history. But I forgot that some history isn't mine to give away." "Charles, I'm sorry, Anne, for not listening. For not seeing what this meant to you." Anne's voice was thick with emotion. "And I'm sorry for the way I handled it. That poor guard shouldn't have been caught in the middle, Sergeant Reed." Charles almost smiled. "He's loyal. Probably too loyal. Edmund arranged a transfer for him. Better position, actually. He'll be fine. No. I made sure of it." They stood together in silence, watching clouds drift across the sky. After a moment, Charles spoke again. "Do you remember when we were children? Mother would let us play in the palace gardens. You were always organizing everything, making sure everyone followed the rules," Anne laughed softly. "And you were always trying to escape them." "Some things never change," no one agreed. "They don't." They walked back toward the others. Camilla stood near a rose garden, talking quietly with one of Elizabeth's former ladies-in-waiting. When she saw Charles and Anne approaching together, her face brightened. "Everything all right?" she asked. "Yes," Charles said, looking at both women. "Everything's all right." Later that evening, Anne returned to her residence. She removed the necklace carefully, holding it up to the light one last time. The sapphires seemed to whisper stories. Stories of her mother, of duty and sacrifice, of love that transcended personal desires. She placed it in a velvet case, then paused. Inside the case was a handwritten note from her mother, dated years ago. Anne had found it while going through Elizabeth's personal effects. "My dearest Anne, this necklace represents more than jewels. It represents commitment, dedication, and love. Wear it with pride. Wear it with honor. And know that I am always with you. Love, Mummy." Anne pressed the note to her heart and allowed herself to cry. Not tears of sadness, but release. She had fought for this. She had stood up for her mother's memory. And despite the pain, despite the conflict, she had succeeded. The necklace was home, and so was she. 3 days later, an official announcement was made. The Windsor sapphire necklace had been formally gifted to Princess Anne by King Charles. Recognizing her lifelong dedication to royal duty and honoring Queen Elizabeth's memory, the announcement mentioned that this had been Queen Elizabeth's wish. Discovered in private papers, the press called it a heartwarming gesture. They praised the king's respect for his mother's legacy. They admired Anne's grace and dedication. Nobody mentioned the guard, the confrontation, or the tension behind palace walls. That's how royal stories worked. The public saw the polished version, the perfect ending. But inside those walls, the real story was messier, more human, far more beautiful. Because it was about people trying their best, making mistakes, finding forgiveness, and choosing family over pride. Marcus read the announcement from his new post at Windsor Castle. He smiled. The storm had passed. The sun was shining. And somewhere in London, a necklace rested where it belonged. 3 weeks after the transfer, Marcus was settling into his new role at Windsor Castle. The work was different here, quieter, with less of the formal ceremony that dominated Buckingham Palace. He was grateful for the change. It was a Tuesday morning when he received an unusual message. The Princess Royal requests your presence in the green drawing room, 2 p.m. Informal. Marcus's heart raced. He hadn't spoken to Anne since the night of the necklace. Part of him had hoped he never would, that the whole incident could fade into memory. But apparently that wasn't going to happen. At exactly 2 o'clock, Marcus entered the green drawing room. Anne stood by the window, dressed casually in slacks and a sweater. This wasn't official business. This was something else. Sergeant Reed, she said, turning to face him. Thank you for coming, of course, ma'am. Please sit. She gestured to a chair. And relax. You look like you're about to face a firing squad, Marcus said stiffly. Anne smiled slightly and took the chair across from him. Between them was a small table with tea already prepared. I owe you a proper apology, Anne began. Not the note I sent, not the quiet arrangements. A real apology face to face. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, you don't need to. I'd put you in an impossible position, and interrupted. I gave you an order that compromised you professionally and personally. I used my rank to make you do something that I knew would cause trouble. That was wrong. She poured tea into 2 cups, her movements practiced and elegant. My mother taught me that leadership means taking responsibility. Not just for successes, but for failures too. I failed you, Marcus. May I call you Marcus? Yes, ma'am. I failed you, Marcus. And I'm sorry. The sincerity in her voice caught him off guard. This was Princess Anne, known for being tough, unyielding, sometimes difficult. But here she was, apologizing to a guard. A sergeant. Someone she could have ignored or dismissed. I understood why you gave the order, ma'am, Marcus said quietly. It wasn't about jewelry. It was about your mother. Anne's eyes glistened. Yes, it was. But that doesn't excuse how I handled it. I could have found another way. A better way. Instead, I chose the path that protected me and put you at risk. She handed him a cup of tea. How are you adjusting here? Windsor, treating you well? Yes, ma'am. It's different, but good. Different how? Marcus considered his words carefully. At Buckingham, everything is formal, structured. Every moment has protocol. Here it feels more ... human, if that makes sense, and nodded. It does. My mother loved Windsor. She always said it was the only place she could truly breathe. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping tea. Then Anne spoke again. I heard you didn't tell the king it was my order. You could have. You probably should have, but you didn't, no, ma'am. Why? Marcus looked down at his teacup. Because it wasn't my place to betray your confidence. You gave me an order. I followed it. The consequences were mine to bear. That's loyalty, Anne said softly. Real loyalty. Not the ceremonial kind we see in public, the kind that costs something. She set down her cup. I want you to know that your loyalty means something to me. More than you might realize. This family, this institution, runs on loyalty. But too often we take it for granted. We forget that loyalty should go both ways. Annette reached into her pocket and pulled out a small box. She placed it on the table between them. Open it. Marcus hesitated, then picked up the box. Inside was a medal. Not a military decoration, but something personal. Engraved with the royal cipher and a simple inscription, for loyalty and courage. Anne, this isn't official, Anne explained. You won't wear it in uniform or add it to any record. But I wanted you to have something. A reminder that your choice mattered. That you mattered. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Ma'am, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything. Anne stood, and Marcus quickly followed. Just keep being who you are, Marcus. Keep being honest and loyal and brave. The crown needs people like you. She extended her hand. Marcus shook it, feeling the firm grip of someone who had spent a lifetime serving others. One more thing, Anne said. I spoke to Camilla last week. We had lunch together. Talked. Really talked. For the first time, I think I understand her. And she understands me. That's good to hear, ma'am. She asked about you, actually. Wanted to know if you were all right? I think she feels guilty, too, in her own way. She never wanted you caught in the middle any more than I did. Walked toward the door, then paused. We're all just people, Marcus. Royal or not, we make mistakes. We hurt each other. But if we're lucky, we learn, we grow, and we find ways to forgive. She looked back at him. Thank you for teaching me that. Then she was gone, leaving Marcus alone with his tea and the small medal that represented something bigger than he'd ever expected. That evening, Marcus returned to his quarters. He placed the medal in a drawer beneath his other personal items. It wasn't for show. It was for him. A reminder of a strange, difficult, ultimately meaningful moment in his life. His phone buzzed. A message from his mother, asking how he was doing. Marcus smiled and typed back, "Good. Really good. Had an interesting day at work." He couldn't tell her about the princess, the apology, the medal, but he could tell her that he felt valued, that his work mattered, that he'd made the right choice, even when it had been hard. Sometimes Marcus thought life was about those small choices, the moments when you decide to stand firm, to be loyal, to do what's right even when it costs you something. He looked out his window at Windsor Castle, ancient stones glowing in the evening light. Generations of people had walked these halls. Thousands of stories, most never told. Marcus's story was just one more thread in that vast tapestry, but it was his thread, his moment, his choice. And somewhere in London, in a velvet case in Princess Anne's residence, the Windsor sapphire necklace rested peacefully. No longer a symbol of conflict, but of resolution. A family finding its way back to each other, of duty, loyalty, and love. Asterisk. 6 months later, the story had faded from palace gossip. New scandals emerged. New dramas took center stage. The incident with the necklace became just another whispered tale in the long history of the royal family, but for those involved, nothing had really faded at all. Marcus stood at attention during a formal ceremony at Windsor Castle. The king was presenting honors to various service members and civilians who had shown exceptional dedication. It was routine. Marcus wasn't expecting anything special. Then his name was called, Sergeant Marcus Reed. Please step forward. Marcus's heart stopped. He glanced at his commander, who nodded. Slowly, Marcus walked to the front of the hall. The king stood waiting, a medal in his hands. But not just any medal. This was an order of merit for distinguished service. Charles looked at Marcus, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke, his voice carrying across the hall. Sergeant Reed has demonstrated exceptional loyalty, integrity, and courage in the face of difficult circumstances. He has served the crown with distinction, and today, we honor that service. As Charles pinned the medal to Marcus's uniform, he leaned in slightly and whispered, "My sister was right about you. Thank you for your discretion and your loyalty." Marcus could barely breathe. "Thank you, Your Majesty," No, Charles said quietly. "Thank you." Marcus returned to his position, his legs shaking. He caught sight of Anne in the crowd of observers, standing beside Camilla. Both women were smiling. Anne gave him the smallest nod. Camilla placed her hand briefly over her heart. After the ceremony, Marcus found himself surrounded by fellow guards offering congratulations. But his mind was elsewhere. He kept thinking about that night 6 months ago. The fear, the uncertainty, the weight of impossible choices. "Quite an honor," a voice said beside him. Marcus turned to see Sir Edmund Hargrove. "Well deserved, I might add." "I just did my job, sir," No, Edmund said. "You did much more than that. You showed us all what loyalty really means. Not blind obedience, but thoughtful service. You could have exposed the family conflict. Could have sold your story to the press for a fortune, but you didn't." Marcus hadn't even considered that option. That wouldn't have been right. Edmund smiled. "Exactly. That's why you're standing here with a medal instead of standing in an unemployment line." He glanced toward where Anne and Camilla stood talking, heads close together, laughing at something. Look at them. 6 months ago, they could barely stand to be in the same room. Now they have lunch together twice a month. They text each other. They've become friends, in their own way. Because of the necklace? Marcus asked. Because of honesty? Edmund corrected. That night forced everyone to confront truths they'd been avoiding. Anne's grief over her mother. Camilla's insecurity about her place in the family. Charles's struggle to balance being a son, a husband, and a brother. All of it came out because of one necklace and one brave guard. Edmund patted Marcus's shoulder. Sometimes the best thing you can do for people is force them to face what they've been hiding from. You did that whether you meant to or not. Over the following weeks, Marcus noticed subtle changes in the palace dynamics. Anne and Camilla were often seen together at events, a united front. Charles seemed more relaxed, less burdened by family tension. Even the staff seemed lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from the entire household. One evening, Marcus was walking through Windsor's corridors when he heard music. Following the sound, he found himself near a small private sitting room. Through the partially open door, he saw Anne, Charles, and Camilla together. Anne was playing the piano, something slow and beautiful. Charles and Camilla sat nearby, holding hands, listening. It was such a simple scene, a family moment. But Marcus understood its significance. This was healing. This was forgiveness. This was the real story that would never make headlines. Marcus quietly walked away, leaving them to their privacy. A year after the incident, Marcus was promoted to guard commander at Windsor. It was a prestigious position, one usually reserved for officers with decades more experience. But Anne had personally recommended him, and Charles had agreed. On his first day in the new role, Marcus received a package. Inside was a framed photograph. It showed Queen Elizabeth wearing the Windsor sapphire necklace, smiling at the camera with that knowing, gentle expression she was famous for. Below the photo was a handwritten note. Marcus, some battles are worth fighting. Some sacrifices are worth making. Thank you for understanding the difference. With deep appreciation and respect, there was a second note in different handwriting. Thank you for your kindness during a difficult time. You showed grace when others might have shown cruelty. I won't forget that. With gratitude, Camilla. Marcus hung the photograph in his office. It reminded him every day that behind the ceremonies, behind the protocol, behind the crowns and titles, there were just people. Complicated, flawed, beautiful people trying to do their best. Years later, when Marcus retired from royal service, he received a final letter. It came on royal stationery, sealed with wax. Dear Marcus, as you begin your retirement, I want you to know that your service went far beyond guard duty. You helped a family remember what matters. You showed us that loyalty, honor, and courage aren't just words in a ceremony. They're choices we make in the hardest moments. The Windsor sapphire necklace sits in my collection now, a reminder of my mother, yes, but also a reminder of you. The guard who stood firm when the world seemed to shake. Thank you for everything. May your retirement be filled with the peace you helped create for others. With profound gratitude, and Marcus folded the letter carefully and placed it in a box with the medal Anne had given him, the photograph, and other mementos from his years of service. These weren't just objects. They were proof that his life had meant something, that his choices had mattered. He thought about that night, the night that changed everything. The fear in Camilla's eyes, the determination in Anne's voice, the weight of the necklace in his hands. At the time, he'd thought he was just following orders, but he'd been doing something more. He'd been standing at the intersection of duty and conscience, protocol and humanity. And he'd chosen to stand firm, not because it was easy, not because he knew how things would turn out, but because it was right. Marcus looked out his window at the English countryside, rolling green hills stretching to the horizon. He was just a regular person now. No more royal assignments. No more palace intrigue. Just a man with memories and a life well lived. But sometimes, on quiet evenings, he would take out that photograph of Queen Elizabeth wearing the sapphire necklace, and he would remember. Remember the night that taught him loyalty isn't about blind obedience. It's about standing up for what matters, even when it costs you everything. The necklace had found its way home, and so had Marcus. Some stories don't end with fanfare. They end with quiet satisfaction, with lessons learned, with relationships healed. This was one of those stories. The guard took Camilla's necklace for Princess. And what happened next didn't just stun the palace, it changed them all forever. The story may be over, but if it touched your heart, make sure you're subscribed for more incredible, true stories like this. Hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. Which moment affected you the most? Let us know. Until next time, remember, sometimes the smallest acts of courage create the biggest changes.